right, guys, I really appreciate the quietness here. So I will formally introduce myself. I am Dr. Erika La Vella, your second or one of two weight loss surgeons here at Good Samaritan Regional Medical Center. And it is my absolute pleasure today to be talking to you guys about my favorite subject in the whole world, why gut health matters, and specifically, why does it matter for weight loss surgery? And like we've been talking about, this is going to be a 4-part series. So you'll see me next month, the month after that, and the month after that. And I thought this time of year, coming into the new year, feeling all that pressure that we have to put our best face and our best food planning, right? Everybody's trying to take advantage of making us all feel horrible about ourselves coming time to the new year. I wanted to give you as much education, information to empower you to really feel in charge of your body, your weight loss results, and really your health. So a little bit about me. I wasn't always a doctor. I wasn't always a food-loving nutritionist. In fact, I grew up most of the ways that most kids here do in America. I literally ate sugary cereal every morning for breakfast. Fruity Pebbles right there on the left. That was my most favorite breakfast. My first job was at McDonald's, so I was eating fast food just about every day, not even just when I worked there, but even before that. Corn dogs were one of my most favorite lunch items. I would eat corn dogs definitely several times a week. And I had a family situation where my mother was a full-time school teacher. And so while she was working full-time, she was also expected to be full-time housewife, cook, clean, things like that. So my dad did none of the cooking. And I think this is kind of a common scenario where you don't have necessarily foodie, cooking, food-loving parents. You have to get creative. And so you have to do a lot of like semi-homemade box prepared meals, right? So a lot of you on this call have definitely had these conversations with your dietitians about the hidden sodium, the extra calories, the hidden fat, the hidden sugar that comes from all these box prepared foods. And these are processed foods, right? Everything shown here is a processed food diet. And I grew up eating this stuff. I didn't know any better. So fast forward, I went to college. I went to college with the ambition to be a doctor. And I took my first nutrition class and I ended up falling in love with it because nutrition, really all the light bulbs kind of went off. Oh, wow. When you eat a fruit or a vegetable, it has vitamins A, C, E, D, and K, which are antioxidants. And then all these other different scientific names for the chemicals that are in real food. When a body eats real food, our DNA scans it. And every cell in the human body only lives a finite period of time. And so knowing that our bodies are constantly aging, constantly inching towards death, the ability for us to actually eat real food actually slows down that process and turns our bodies into a healthy aging machine, right? So we can't prevent aging, we can't prevent dying. We're all constantly crawling and inching our way there. But learning about nutrition really gave me a new heart, a new direction towards going into medical school. And I got really excited. So I do believe that food is medicine. And I shared the same vision here that our dietitians have. Dr. Yarbrough has this vision as well. We've all experienced it. When we fuel our body with really healthy things, magic happens. We don't feel sick. We don't get colds. We don't get run down. We don't have high blood pressure. We don't have achy knees. We have things that can work for us and to help us do the things that we want to do. Well, I got into medical school and that was lovely, but medical school was also very stressful. I was taking 12 to 14 exams every 2 weeks, and there was a lot of pressure to always perform and always be the best and not fail. Well, I was having all these gastrointestinal issues. I was having intermittent diarrhea, constipation, not and I was also having tons of anxiety and emotional outbursts. And that just wasn't really me, wasn't really my norm. I didn't feel like myself. I had kind of just chalked it all up to stress and persevered. And what I ended up discovering was that I had a gastrointestinal parasite. I also had a gastrointestinal condition called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and I had a yeast overgrowth as well. So under a microscope, my stool was examined, and that is where they found all of this imbalance. And now an imbalance is just, it wasn't working for me. I didn't have the right ecosystem. You look outside in your backyard, here in Oregon, and you see that there's different kinds of trees, there's different kinds of grasses, there's different kinds of native plants, and then there's invasive species, right? So nobody here in Oregon, we all know it, blackberries. Blackberries are super invasive, they're hard to kill. Well, that's kind of what this gut parasite and these different types of bugs were doing, taking over me like an invasive species. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a little bit of the how, why, and what that occurred. Ultimately, I finished medical school, treated the gut parasite, and really kind of got over those emotional hurdles that I was explaining. And it didn't take long. It really only took a couple months before I kind of snapped out of it and I felt like I was myself again. So I am now your bariatric surgeon, and I consider myself to be a health coach with a scalpel. So this is largely what I eat now, and I am by no means perfect. I probably eat one corn dog a year. I have a 4-year-old daughter. I try not to give her all the sugary cereal, but gosh, I probably had Fruity Pebbles once in the last year too. So there is by no means a desire to be perfect. And there's still a desire to have fun and to find joy in those processed foods that I once ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But now with as much education and awareness as I have, and with how good I feel when I eat real food, I literally eat these foods every day. The picture on the left showing red cabbage and carrots and kale and probably some apples in there. That looks like a kale slaw salad. In the middle picture, you see broccolini and broccoli and sweet potato and sesame seeds. The picture next over, that's a picture of different fermented food products, so like kefir and Greek yogurt and sauerkraut and kimchi and miso. And then the picture on the right being like a whole grain lentil dish. And there you see tomatoes and red onions and probably even some edamame in there. So what research is showing is that when the healthiest of guts and the healthiest of people, they go hand in hand. A really healthy person has a really healthy gastrointestinal tract. And a really healthy gastrointestinal tract is eating many different plants a week. In fact, 30 has been kind of the magic number. People who eat 30 different plants a week seem to have the healthiest of gastrointestinal symptoms or systems. So I had originally named this talk Primordial Paradigm, and the reason I did is because the word primordial means to exist at or from the beginning of time. And today is just going to be a big broad overview, but inside of our bodies are trillions of microorganisms. While some of them are bacteria, some of them are viruses, some of them are fungi, and some of them are any other little creature that you can see under a microscope. And these creatures were the first living organisms on our planet. And so if you have any biology in your background, when you study the evolution of the earth and knowing that they're the earliest microorganisms, all of life has really evolved in some way, in some organization of these little creatures. And like I said, you can think of bad ones as being like blackberries or maybe even dandelions, the undesirable thing that you want for that environment. But each one of them has a role, and it doesn't mean that they're all bad in different contexts. And then here's another concept that is really, really important to grasp the full breadth of what these next 4 months are going to be going over, and that is of emergence. And so an emergent property or an emergent concept is one that means that there's lots of small little things going on all at once within an environment. And in order for these things to work independently, they have to work collaboratively together in order to form a larger complex ecosystem. And you think about the way that little bees pollinate the different flowers, and then how the bees traveling from flower to flower is also what's helping the flowers survive and the flowers propagate. So that's really important to think about going on within our own bodies, is that these organisms can't just live by themselves. They can't live without us. In fact, they can't live without us at all. So today we're going to be talking about how your brain, which is an organ, it's a thinking organ, and your gut, which is more of a digestive and processing organ, how they're connected. And they're connected because of these more emergent, abstract kind of concepts. So these are all the details in which we're going to be kind of examining as being really, really, really important to how your body works and how your body processes food and how good food helps your body work. So at the top left, microbiome development. Microbiome meaning all these different little organisms that live inside your body. Science now knows that how healthy your mother was is directly correlated to how healthy you can be. The birth mode, so whether or not you were born vaginal or C-section, is also really important, because being born through the birth canal exposes you to the types of bacteria that are native to your mother that are not going to be inhabiting your body. So this is our first contact with these bacteria. And then how you were fed. So if you were breastfed versus formula fed, and then whether or not you had antibiotics or medications as a child. All of these things shape the development of what types of bacteria are there. Do you have a rainforest, gorgeous flowers, beneficial insects, everything's working together? Or do you have a really barren, dry, blackberry-filled field that's full of thorns and stickers, right? And then the next kind of layer here is this nervous system development. Before this call started, I was having a chat just about how we felt when the fires were here and how that alerted our nervous systems and how we all felt kind of stressed and on edge, and this idea of having to be packed and ready to go. Well, that's that kind of fight or flight nervous system feeling. And now that the smoke has cleared and people are starting to move back into their homes and this dust is kind of settling, we start to feel safe again, and we start to feel like we're not stressed. So that's the duality here between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. I told you you're going to get a little bit of a biology lesson today. But just acknowledging that we have that full capacity to be really stressed, really high on alert, run from a lion, tiger, or bear, save our lives, and then to be able to kind of calm back down and feel really safe. So our nervous system can develop also based on early life experiences. So depending on what sort of stressful events your mother went through when you were a baby inside her tummy, that imprints on you. And then once you're born, the ability to have love and safety when you're such a tiny, tiny baby. Babies are not born with the ability to think, feed, take care of themselves in any way. In fact, for the first several years of a young child's life, they are completely dependent upon caregivers. And so the ability for a young child to feel safe, feel loved, know that food is a dependable thing for them, that when they're hungry that they can get fed, and that when they're wet or need a diaper change, that can happen too. The other layer here, and this is definitely affects a lot of us here today on this call. Okay, is everybody back? I see ya, good. I'm just gonna make sure we can check this out. So I don't know how much of that was missed or said, but what I was getting at is this notion of adverse childhood experiences. That can be everything from having a parent leave. Maybe a parent was, sadly a death of a parent. A parent maybe had to spend some time in jail. Maybe there was alcoholism. I mean, there's some pretty heavy topics that can come up, but whenever a young child feels separated, whenever they feel neglected or abused and hurt in some way, whenever that trust and that security of love and attachment is broken, our nervous systems remember that. And then, of course, we can have accidents and adult experiences as well. So we're going to be talking about all of these things. And like I said, we're going to be kind of teasing it out over the next 4 classes. So our autonomic nervous system, in a nutshell, is the part of our body. It's all of our organs and our brain. It's how they're connected together. It's all of the things that happen in our body automatically without us even having to think about it. And between the gut and the brain, there is a nerve called the vagus nerve. And the picture on the right is showing literally how everything in the body is connected because of this nerve. And I just want to highlight here a lot of my information and investigation of these concepts and linking these 2 things together has come from Dr. Stephen Porges, who is a physiatrist researcher. And he first named this polyvagal theory in the 90s. And it's now a very worldwide accepted kind of phenomenon, just that our bodies and our organs are a sensing organ, just like our brains and our eyes and our ability to touch is a sensing organ. And that all of these childhood development into adult, really just humanistic needs of looking into somebody's eyes, hearing somebody's voice, feeling warmth as a sign of safety, and then conveying that. And whenever we have that warmth kind of taken away, that kind of ignites our nervous system and can make us feel really anxious, fight or flighty, and an inability to trust. And all of these things affect our health. And they also communicate to the gut microbiome. So the sympathetic state, like we mentioned, this is when the fire was going on. What happens is our eyes will actually dilate, so our pupils will open up so we can let more light in so that we can become hyper aware of our surroundings. This is an interesting state to be in because blood flow gets diverted away from the organs of digestion. Your body is literally prepping yourself to run, to fight, a given threat. So even though it was fires that was going on, our brain doesn't always know the difference between a fire and an animal or a bully that we need to defend ourselves against. So all the blood flow really halts going towards the organs. And sometimes, I'm sure some of you can relate to this, but when we get to these really high sympathetic states, sometimes our bowels don't move, so we can get constipated, we can have abdominal pain, and so just digestion really slows down. It's interesting because a little bit of stress is a good thing. It actually trains our nervous system what we can and can't handle. But if we get overly stressed, then this can actually increase all of these stress hormones and can actually help drive things like type 2 diabetes. Your blood sugar can actually go up, and it can also ramp up the inflammation response. So pain, joint pain and things like that can also go up. Heart disease, right? So heart disease is now known to be an inflammatory disease. And then the opposite of that, this parasympathetic part of our nervous system, which is kind of where we're at now. We feel safe. The smoke has cleared. You know, whether or not, if you did have to be evacuated and your house did burn down, I know that has happened to some people in our program. Now you have a roof over your head, right? You have a family or a friend who took you in. And so we can kind of recover from that really stressful event. It's in this parasympathetic state that we have the ability to heal and repair any damage that was done. So our body wants to be in a parasympathetic state at some point every day. In fact, a lot of people, we can't go to sleep if we don't get into this parasympathetic state. In fact, sleep is largely all parasympathetic. This is where we rest and digest. When we're relaxed like this is the state we want to be in when we eat a meal, because we actually make stomach acid, we release bile from the liver. These are all key things that happen in order for us to digest our food properly. This is also connected to our eyes, facial muscles, and also even our vocal cords. So my ability right now to talk smoothly and calmly, that's because I'm in a parasympathetic state. I feel really good, really calm, really safe right now talking to you guys about these things. The fires are not actively roaring and threatening my existence. So this idea of I can be socially engaging because I feel safe is also part of this parasympathetic experience. It's interesting though, because there's a pendulum here. So it can swing really high one way, you're too stressed, too alert, now you're making too much stress hormone, and now you're having complications of that all throughout your body. The opposite being too true. If I get too parasympathetic, too much tone here, this is what can happen when somebody sees a needle or somebody sees blood and they faint. So it's actually a protective mechanism in the body, and Dr. Porges and many other researchers like him think that this is leftover evolution from reptiles. So when a reptile gets scared or spooked, it might rear up and, maybe I'm thinking of the bearded dragon that like puffs out its little lizard beard. But so they might fight, but there's also a reaction where they will go limp and almost play dead. And this is called an immobilization, or like a fear response. And so in medicine or healthcare, I've seen it a lot. I've seen people pass out as soon as they see a needle or as soon as they see blood. But what happens is the blood pressure drops, the heart rate drops, and it's what we call a vagal response. So in this setting, metabolism slows down to almost nothing, and that's exactly what reptiles do. That's how a reptile can not eat or drink as long as they're cold, so their metabolism all slows down. But that's part of this evolutionary function, and it's believed to be a protective mechanism. I've seen videos showing this on YouTube. You can see a video of a gazelle in Africa running from a lion, and the lion actually catches the gazelle and has it by the back of the neck. The gazelle goes limp, and you think the gazelle is dead, and then a hyena walks up on the lion and starts distracting the lion and trying to also get the gazelle, thinking that the gazelle is dead. The lion leaves the gazelle for 2 minutes to chase away, or not even 2 minutes, 2 seconds to chase away the hyena, and that gazelle jumps up and sprints away and actually escapes. So this ability for our nervous system to protect us when we think something horrible is about to happen, we dissociate and we kind of go into that freeze state. This is very slowing to the metabolism. Our bodies do not want to be in a, they're not as active as they can be when they feel safe. So I told you I'm going to be really trying to teach you guys a lot of science subjects here, but there's this idea of hormesis, and hormesis just means that there is a pendulum, and that with a little bit of a stressor, it's actually good for us. It's like exercise, right? So if we exercise just a little bit, maybe we get a little bit sore. Once you recover, you actually build up that endurance. So next time you can exercise and walk a little bit longer, maybe lift a little bit heavier weight, but that's hormesis. And it's a little bit of stress, a little bit of swing from one to the other is a good thing. Science is proving this in everything: blood sugar regulation, sleep, exercise, even the timing and cadence in which we feed ourselves. Everything is showing that to get the beneficial dose, you have to actually go from one extreme to the other. But what is happening is our ability to come back down. So again, speaking about the fire, because it was such a recent community stressor, right? Everybody felt it. When we were at the peak of our stress, how tense that felt. and how an alert we felt. And then now that ability to come down. So training ourselves to feel stress, but then to reorient to our environment and feel safe again is really, really important. So like I said, if we're in a sympathetic state, our bodies cannot digest a thing. But when we're in that parasympathetic state, that's when our organs of digestion are working optimally. And I don't want to confuse you guys with calories in eating, because the body absolutely needs nourishment, and it needs nourishment in a predictable way in order to extract health from the food that we're eating into lower inflammation. And at the root of that connection really is what's going on at the gut level and what is going on between these bacteria that live in our bodies and the food that we're feeding it. So digestion, and this is all hopefully starting to sink in, why we educate you to prepare your meals, eat while sitting down, put food in your mouth, chew it around for a little bit of time, right? We even say count to 30 if this is so foreign to you. Chew your food till you get that really soft, squishy consistency. By doing all of these things and really being mindful and intentional about how we're eating, you are priming your vagal system, you're priming that parasympathetic state so that your body can digest the food appropriately. I think about people who sometimes have acid reflux or indigestion, and oftentimes they are not relaxed enough to allow their body to digest their food appropriately. So just thinking about food, we actually start priming these things. Our mouth starts to salivate. In your mouth is where you make enzymes. Those are little chemical scissors that start to literally cut up the food that you are eating. So your teeth are doing some of the cutting, but also some of your saliva and your spit is doing that as well. Then we swallow it, and it goes down behind our heart into our stomach, which is below our diaphragm. And many of you have or will have an altered stomach here pretty soon, right? So we can talk about that in some of your question and answer to follow this. But then once it's in the stomach, you want stomach acid to be secreted. Without stomach acid, we have pH. So pH is whether or not you have an acid or base balance in the body. And the upper GI tract in the stomach really is supposed to be an acidic environment in order to have the appropriate microbiome niches, those little ecosystem pockets. And so once it's in the stomach, churning and mixing with that stomach acid, there's a muscle at the bottom of the stomach, and that will open and release this food into the intestine, where then it will mix with bile and pancreatic enzymes, and all sorts of magical things happen. But this upper part of the digestive system really cues in our ability to extract energy, not just calories, but energy. Remember, antioxidants, all the colors of the rainbow, all those vitamins and minerals. Our body is always trying to get these things from our food. Then it gets even more exciting, at least when you're a microbiome nerd like me. The small intestine, when you look at it under a microscope, it really does look like shag carpet. And what these pictures are showing are these villi. So villi is the name for the little finger-like projections. And the reason our intestine has so many finger-like projections is so that we have the most amount of surface area to, again, absorb all the nutrients we need. When our body gets enough nutrients, it actually downregulates hunger and upregulates that metabolism, energy efficiency kind of thing. Studies have shown in rats, and I understand we are not rats, but when rats are sedentary, in other words, they don't exercise, they don't move, they just kind of sit there and eat, these finger-like projections in the rat bowel become fatty infiltrated. So you actually see fat deposits in it, and they become short and fat. So they actually lose the ability to extract that healthy nutrients from their diet. I found that to be very interesting because we do see, what we call fatty liver disease just from being not very active as well. So these finger-like projections, on top of them is a really thick layer, or it should be thick, but it's a layer of mucus. And so this mucus layer is designed to help protect the tissue underneath. And then the digestive enzymes are on top of it. And then you also have your nervous system trying to coordinate and move food through at a rate in which your body can also absorb it. This is just to kind of wrap your brain around the interesting complexities going on under the surface. And so then we are essentially what we eat, because in order for a piece of chicken or a piece of steak, and I talk about protein a lot because it's very important, this concept of amino acids. So a protein is like the food-based protein. Soy could be another one. And many of you who are on your post-op diet, we've been talking a lot about protein, right? We want to make sure that you're meeting your protein needs before we try adding any other different type of food, because the protein is really important. This picture here on the top right, the amino acid conga line, each different protein is made up of tons of different microproteins. And these microproteins, it's up to those chemical scissors in your body, it's up to the stomach acid in your stomach, and it's up to all the other digestive juices and enzymes coming from those other organs to break up this conga line chain into each individual pearl, or each individual little color, little protein here. And what the body does with those is it feeds those to gut bacteria, and then the gut bacteria make these incredible chemicals that then go throughout the rest of your body. Gaba is one of them, and you don't need to know anything about Gaba, but Gaba can be purchased as an individual supplement. Gaba is it's known as a neurotransmitter, kind of like serotonin and melatonin. But GABA helps promote a sense of calm and actually helps your body get ready for sleep. And it's known to help prevent anxiety. People who have chronic pain, when they were to take a narcotic pain medicine, it affects this GABA receptor throughout the whole body. So GABA is really important, and without enough protein, our body can't make it. And it is estimated that, again, 90% of this is actually made by gut bacteria. Here's some more biochemistry for you. So serotonin. Serotonin is one of those neurotransmitters that is essential for well-being, but it's also being studied as being essential for many different functions in the liver and many different functions in the pancreas. In fact, serotonin in this other component, 5-hydroxytryptophan, are actually being proven to help prevent type 2 diabetes, prevent fatty liver disease, lower cholesterol, and be a cofactor here in all these different pathways. I understand you guys aren't scientists or doctors and probably don't care about the biochemistry, but it is pretty exciting to know that your food has the ability to turn into all of these things that you're so often being prescribed drugs for. So like I said, food is medicine. And when you really learn how to take care of your body and feed it right, then everything gets better. And the point of this slide here was just that tryptophan, which is this top right picture here, is one of those amino acids. In fact, tryptophan is really high in bananas. Not that bananas is on your food list for the first 6 to 9 months after bariatric surgery, but if you haven't had bariatric surgery yet, you can have a banana. And if you're that far along post-op, you can eat bananas too. Bananas are high in tryptophan. So is turkey. You guys remember turkey? I remember learning about this when I was even, I think in elementary school. But tryptophan is supposed to make you sleepy. And, eating too much turkey on Thanksgiving and watching too much football and all those things. I remember all the jokes about just, feeling so sleepy. Well, it's partly because of this pathway right here. So without tryptophan, we can't make serotonin. Serotonin being our well-being, well-adjusted, kind of happiness hormone. Serotonin is the receptor in which many antidepressants try to increase serotonin. And then without serotonin, we don't make melatonin. Melatonin is our sleep hormone. So again, nutrition here being the essence, good protein breakdown and protein utilization in the body. Everything is just interconnected and really important. So I'll switch gears now and talk to you a little bit about these gut bacteria. So it's estimated that 90% of all disease is now traced back to disturbances in what populations of gut bacteria are present or absent. Again, do you have blackberries or thorns, or do you have a nice array of kind of native species in there? Why I get so excited about the gut microbiome is just that the number of genes that these bacteria have, and that, remember, genetics is, it's sort of the code. So we all have genetics, but then there's this other factor here where based on how we're eating, how we're drinking, how we're sleeping, we have the power to change the number and different types of bacteria that are growing in our bodies, and then how those are then expressing their genes. And that is called epigenetics. And this is why calories in, calories out doesn't matter, but what types of energy we're taking in and how we're treating our body and what our gut bacteria think is going on in terms of our nervous system is really, really important. So these bacteria actually outnumber the human genome 100 to 1, which means that we are, by definition, more bacteria than we are actual human DNA and human cells. So just to put that in perspective for you, what you do and how you live your life dramatically affects them. And when we keep the bacteria happy, when we keep them healthy and balanced, then we are healthy and balanced. And that is really important and at the heart of my whole clinical and professional practice. Greater than 10,000 different species of bacteria have been found, and 3 times as many different species of viruses have been found in the gut. 99.9% of all humans share similar genetic material. In fact, we're even 99 however many percent, but we're actually very similar to other species of primates as well. So while we're so similar genetically, we differ dramatically. In fact, it's estimated that 90% of us differ from one microbiome genetically to another. So I'm so much more different than you, and you're all, I mean, we can't see each other's faces anymore, at least I can't see you, but we're all very, very different in terms of our gut microbiome and its genetic expression. So to kind of link it all together and where we're going to be going through this is, again, I talked a lot about stress and how we felt when those fires were here. Our brain senses that and then communicates what sort of aspect of that spectrum we're going to be on. Are we going to be sympathetically overdriven, not be able to digest our food very well? We're going to go into survival mode. Or are we going to go the other way? Are we going to be so paralyzed by fear that everything starts to shut down and we actually feel like we can't move, our metabolism slows, and heart rate drops and blood pressure drops? Somewhere in between, and fluxing up and fluxing down, is healthy and normal. In fact, to even go to one extreme or the other, but then our ability to recover. So stress recovery is really important. But what happens in the brain is that it signals all those other organs what's going on. And then at that gut level where those bacteria live, they can sense that. They can pick up on it. And by them sensing it and picking up on it, it can actually change their genetic expression. They can decide, oh, well, if my host is going down, aka you, in this setting of stress, because they don't know the difference between a fire that's miles away and you're the safe house and you're evacuating people. Your brain doesn't know the difference between that or if your house is actually burning down. So we can get tricked. Our biology can get tricked. But what happens from the brain down and then from the gut back up to the brain, this cycle just keeps repeating itself. And so really, we are what we eat. We are also what we think, and we're also what we emote. And our ability to feed ourselves an appropriate kind of diet and support these living organisms supports the brain and also helps us recover. So this is a study that just kind of highlights how this all comes together. And these are studies on probiotics. And every single one of us talked to you guys about probiotics and why they're so important. So this first study here on the left was published in 2011. And what they did is they looked at lab rats. So lab rats are studied a lot for drugs and all sorts of different interventions because we can genetically control mice. So they're bred and cloned so that they literally are the same. And then they're kept in really sterile lab conditions where we can control every single variable. So they did this stress study, and they kept these mice and they swam them, or they put them in these beakers of water, and they let them swim until, well, some of them drowned, or right before they would drown. And then they would breed them, and then they would make their little rat babies. So this is like a second generation study, right? Which again, this is how we know that what happened in your mother and probably what happened in your grandmother or grandfather, why this is so important for our health, because this stuff gets imprinted. So these rats were then fed either Lactobacillus rhamnosus, which is a specific strain of a probiotic bacteria that loves to grow in your Greek yogurt or your kefir, or they were given nothing. And again, these are germ-free mice, and by germ-free, it means they were born in a lab, they weren't really exposed to anything, and they were eating a very limited diet. So they all had the same kind of gut microbiome, if you will. So what happened? Well, those that weren't given the lactobacillus or the probiotic, they had no GABA. Remember that GABA hormone, which is that calming one, the anti-anxiety one, so they had no GABA. But the ones that were given the lactobacillus or the probiotic, they had an increase in their GABA. That calming hormone went up. And then what they noticed is when they swam these two different rats, so the ones that didn't get the probiotic, they drowned faster or they gave up faster. Those that had the probiotic, they kept swimming. They kept swimming with more stress resiliency. And this is how they define this. So this is a rat model of a stress test. And those that had the probiotics on board actually had improved stress resiliency. They could keep swimming. Then they took it a step further and they cut the vagus nerve, the brain gut connection. They just cut it. And when you cut that vagus nerve, your body doesn't get the same signals that go from the brain to the gut and the gut to the brain. It's just you cut it off. It's like you disconnect the phone. You unplug the wireless router. So what happened is those that got the vagotomy, didn't matter if they got the lactobacillus or not, they all drowned again. So they didn't have that significant stress boost of being able to swim longer. So this wasn't even 10 years ago, and these were the first studies that really started to piece together this notion of how incorporated is our emotional behavior and our stress response to our gut, and how our gut can help facilitate improving our stress response. Here's another paper, again, talking about the power of probiotics. This was the first ever study where they looked at a group of people who didn't have the probiotic supplementation, and they looked at another group of people that did, but they did what's called a double-blind trial. And so double-blinded studies in medicine are kind of your gold standard of research, because it means that nobody would make assumptions about one group being better than the other. So in other words, the researchers didn't know if they were taking, it's like placebo, this is a sugar pill, or is this the probiotic pill? And then the people collecting the research data on them, they also didn't know. So this is the gold standard way that you set up medication trials, etc. And men and women were included in this, which is also kind of unique. But what they found is that 45 healthy volunteers took commercial, so over-the-counter probiotic supplementation for 4 weeks. This was a potent multi-strain probiotic that was dry, so it wasn't refrigerated. And what they found is that in just 4 weeks of supplementations, they did functional brain MRIs. So the part of the brain that regulates our emotions had more activity and more blood flow. And that all the patients reported significant improvements in decision making and emotional memory. Exciting. Okay, good. So probiotics are fantastic. I'm going to end here with this poem, and then we're going to go back to that first infographic that I had where we had all those different constituents of the emergent process kind of mapped out. So I found this poem, and it just reminded me of, again, how are all of these things interconnected? And our human experience tells us that our stress is connected to our gut, or that our what happened to us when we were young are still kind of in our bodies, right? So those same kind of responses and that familiarity. So sleek, the eye that sees a whole universe playing out. What happens to a leaf in the breeze is the universe at work. Deft the eye that knows what struggles the chick from the egg. Is the universe in life that grows a greater play at work? To happen in a single mind, to happen in your hand, is to happen across all of kind, among a universe spanned. What makes the ground we tread, what makes the love we feel, makes the universal thread weave its way so real. All right, guys, I'm gonna go back here just to kind of reflect again. I understand that many of you probably have never heard any information like this before. So I've been trying to kind of separate and tease out and make it really tangible for even really lay people to science and to biology to really understand how important and how interconnected everything is from a human physiology perspective. So like I said, microbiome development, which by the way, lecture 2, so next month, I go into a lot more detail about who these organisms are, how they show up in our bodies, and then what we can do to take really good care of them, because we want to have better stress resilience. And as I shared with you, my experience from when I was in medical school, I was so sick because of how my gut wasn't very good. I had all those digestive issues and problems, the parasite, the bacterial imbalances, etc. But then the stress. So I wasn't thriving in that environment because my gut wasn't supporting my stress response. So, mother's health, birth mode, feeding, diet, medications, we're going to talk a lot about that in the next session, next month. And then part 3, we're going to talk a lot about how these aspects of our nervous system are kind of developed. And we're going to be talking a lot about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic stress response. Not necessarily directly related to digestion, but I hope my broad overview today did that for you. The 4th lecture, we're going to talk a lot about what the stress or fight or flight mode does to the gut and to the gut level and the gut bacteria. But one of the things I hadn't yet mentioned in this lecture is just that your gut bacteria are literally listening. They have this special spidey sense, if you will. They have receptors for all of the same things that you have receptors for. In fact, the bacteria in your mouth, if you're a lady, have estrogen receptors, which is why sometimes women can get dental caries or cavities after menopause. So it's like another one of those kind of risk factor time frames. So everything's connected. And that really is the point of today's lecture. So with that, I will stop sharing, if I can figure it out. Maybe Bonnie can help me. The buttons, thank you. Got it, I got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Windows just popped up a little lazily.
Perfect.
I'm really curious to know what you guys think. So let me see if I can, I'll unmute you. And we can, you all. Oh my gosh.
The walk-in shower and double vanity.
Rodney?
Relocating the bedroom here will give Bernadette and
Okay, well, I appreciate you guys typing in the chat. I'm trying how to mute you all. There's like no way.
I do
Very
think
interesting.
yeah, I think people can unmute themselves
Okay, good.
if they have a question. Mhm.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you guys like it. Which part specifically?
You can't have
All of it?
exhaust.
Better. Sometimes, you know, it's just about exposure.
It's a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
I don't want you guys to worry so much about the names, right? The names aren't really that critical. But if I call them something else and you go read someone else's health blog, or you go to this grocery store, and you try to buy your own supplement or whatever, it is important that you also start these names. The rat study. If you like, I can explain that because the rat is really important. What kind of kids taking probiotics, and again, they only studied that one specific time in a particular study, but probiotics means that our bodies have evolved eating. We've only electricity and refrigeration for the last 100 years. Before that, how are humans eating? And we'd have to fresh. We couldn't idea of, you know, fresh food as often as you can, but then fresh is a way to sort of preserve it and keep it on the counter. Most have a form of cat people on their property. People when you milk a cow, and that cow's milk sits on the cow for a couple days, it starts to spontaneously with bacteria that are already in the air. That is what water fermentation was. Here, that's how we made wine. That's how humans have been fermenting. Basically, the earth has been giving us these things. These are so probiotic foods. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they were just part of everything that we did. Yogurt, many of you in our program are doing some form of yogurt, right? We like Greek yogurt because it's higher in protein. Greek yogurt traditionally, or is just, it's just yogurt that's been stripped, that has a higher protein content. Bonnie, are you checking the chat? Are you chatting them? Perfect. Okay, good. Appreciate that. So probiotic foods are really important. Some soybeans, like chopped up, fermented, and buried underground. Sometimes it's fermented like 5 years before they pull it up. And miso can be mixed in as like a nice salad condiment. It can be mixed from some of your broth. I heard somebody only 2 savory food. Heating up a little broth and putting like a spoon of miso and sipping it is a probiotic, gut-friendly thing. And then you're in swing. They swing from one day or having hours of no energy. Well, drinking or making sure you have a lot of probiotic food. Another way that you can help supplement your energy. Are again really happy and healthy. They can help maximize your body's ability to fantastic, and it's just a fermented cabbage, kind of spicy. If you guys like spicy, kimchi is great. Somebody mentioned kombucha. Kombucha has with cabbage the sugar or the because the bacteria this food, that's the product. You're really eating these foods. So in the case of milk, eating milk sugar, and the case of cabbage, eating the carbohydrate. So in the case of kombucha, you have to take green tea, mushroom will be on the top, and you have to feed it. And so it's a good probiotic food. The species of probiotic in it is called Saccharomyces boulardii. I should say mindful that you aren't drinking too much sugar. We've noticed the same thing with kefir, right? So a lot of these foods have this sort of like kind of astringent, almost like a pungent, like a like blue cheese. Like cheese is different, right? We all know that, right? There's blue cheese is a raw cheese. It's fermented. There's bacteria on it, mold on it. That's what gives it that delicious, if you like it, flavor. I love it. But it's not for everyone, especially when we've grown up with such a processed food palate. I mean, I showed you I was eating corn dogs, hamburger helper, and sugary cereal every day. It's not like I jumped straight into loving plain yogurt. I didn't jump straight into it. So being really mindful of sugar intake. With most of these probiotic foods, you only need like a tablespoon or two at your meal. If you're doing Greek yogurt, that should have probiotics in it. Kefir, really only need 2 ounces. And then that rat study, so again, I was trying to explain how your nervous system, starting in the brain, but also your whole body. So you guys know what it's like to get really nervous and you get butterflies in your eye. Why would nerves show up in your abdomen? Because that's how our body, right? But we were told that emotions, something that's in your head, right? But so many cultures around the world recognize that we are really emotional beings who think, but we feel all the time. And our brain is constantly communicating to our entire body. Really separate. So everything constantly sensing. Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm going to kind of just read through the chat here a little bit, and I'm going to read some of these comments outside. I won't comment on your names particularly. Okay. I think with my sleeve recovery, gut health was essential, and more so since I had complications. Absolutely. When we give you surgery, we give you antibiotics. And so it's really important. In fact, we've had a couple years, a couple patients get a bacterial infection of their colon, didn't have healthy enough microbiomes. And so that is why we are typically pushing, or at least asking you to start considering what sort of probiotic foods are you consuming before you have surgery, and what foods can you continue after surgery. The diet after surgery is so limited, right? Because we're practicing what it's like to eat and swallow, and making sure that we're getting enough protein, enough of those amino acids, early stage. The early stage diet surgery, where it's mostly protein, you're going to need extra fiber and some extra probiotic supplementation. Your gut happy and healthy. Again, next month we're going to talk a lot more about that in detail. We talked about miso instead of kefir as a probiotic. Absolutely, kefir is great. Slides, I'll be looking at them again as a reference. Perfect. You guys can also go to lavellayourguts.com. I have all of these recorded, so you guys can watch it there. Insane what a pregnant woman experiences while carrying us, and it affects us. It is insane. It is. And, I see a lot of women on this call who you look like your mothers, maybe even grandmothers. I'm kind of on a mission to get as many women and women to understand this information. That way we can be before getting pregnant, and we can really make sure that we're really healthy moms so that we can affect future generations more positively. Better probiotic, ones that need refrigeration or no? Typically, those are refrigerated or in a fermented food. So, you can keep Nancy in the fridge forever, never, which is pretty amazing because there's so many beneficial probiotics in it. It will literally boil. Same with kimchi or sauerkraut. So refrigerated probiotics mean that there's some active food in there for bacteria. And so you have to keep your capsule refrigerated. I think you have to take probiotics if you are regular. So I do food for the list and kefir, kraut. There's different food. And definitely those capsules. Putting that in. I'm curious to know if more diarrhea at first, not as supposed to change. Kind of depends. Typically, no. Typically, probiotics do that, or if you have to dairy, right? So if milk is diarrhea, then your consumption of beer might cause that. But I know a lot of people that feel that way go and eat hard cheese and they don't feel like they have it with hard cheese. There shouldn't be any inflammation. They shouldn't. I know eliminate kind of a controversial subject, but there's it's a really good food for us, and then there's some evidence saying it can cause prostate cancer in some men and other interesting things. Again, I think you previously knew about the body to examine now that we know that gut bacteria is such a prevalence in our body, that everybody is so different in terms of how their microbiome works for them. All right, I'm going to keep going. You did a great job explaining it all. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jill. About kombucha. Oh, yeah. And I think Bonnie answered that. Let it go flat and then see if it'll work fine. It made a lot of sense. I think with blood draws by stress. I've also been losing weight since the fires, and I was trying to figure out how I was feeling. Same. I was being fed from others when we were evacuated. Oh, Brooke. So when I started losing during stress, I was wondering how that was. Again, it's a pendulum. So, some people lose, other people gain, and you might gain knowingly, right? Like without any effort. It's not like you're consciously eating. You are unconsciously eating because we can stress eat too. We can stress eat because from the tiny baby, yelled or screamed, we were fed milk until up. So it's very normal to feel safety and security and acknowledge that all you're trying to do is to reduce stress and find insecurity. Knowing that food and digestion, metabolism are so intimately connected to that, it gives you the opportunity to really sink into your body and sink into your experience. I know the weight loss industry doesn't really get this touchy-feely, right? It's usually, count your calories, restrict yourself. You're not exercising hard enough. If the surgery didn't work, well, then it's. Did you know that in my industry, after surgery, they call that weight recidivism. Recidivism is actually language used to describe criminals who actually were released from jail and then maybe went and did another criminal act. So language used in my industry to describe people who didn't have as much weight loss as they wanted. It actually makes me sick. So I'm on absolute mission, right? Sad. I'm on an absolute mission to really I think education is really important. I grew up eating my Fruity Pebbles, corn dogs, eating McDonald's every day. And without my nutritional background and I ever would have found health, right? I've been fed the same sort of narratives and advertising. Okay. Do you suggest probiotic supplement? Yeah. So I think I answered that question. Looks like Bonnie also answered it. Help. Like I said, there's not a single study that I mentioned, one being in rats showing that resiliency was dramatically affected, and the other one showing that every decision I make has an emotional consequence. And so being able to be more decisive, more clear with where decisions come from is okay. I worry about all the salt. It can raise your blood pressure. So these microorganisms evolved from the ocean, right? The ocean is a giant water bath, and so really in order for fermentation to occur, have just a bit of salt and so I worry salt that's in a fermented food product actually the active fermentation about is like, remember when I showed you the picture of Hamburger Helper? There's a lot of sodium in Hamburger Helper. That is the toxic side. That is the eating those processed foods. That's where you're going to see the pressure. That's where you're going to see water retention. But the more kind of more natural environments of just trying to get these bacteria. Honestly, if the bacteria are healthy, then it's good for you. And I know it sounds kind of abstract, but it's true. So, you know, again, all those fermented food products, they're fantastic for you. Yep, and Bonnie also addressed that. They should have this information in school. I couldn't agree more. If any of you are school teachers and you want me to come speak to your class, I would be more than happy to. I'm 63, kefir. At this point, how much correction is occurring with my compared to the decades of processed foods? That is a really good question. So again, next slide, how important it was, what mom did during pregnancy to how we were born. Your gut microbiome is relatively set by the age of 3 to 5. Early years are really important. And then all through life, you have the ability to sort of like deviate from that, but you always have the ability to come back. So absolutely, the foods that you eat and how you digest them can improve your gut microbiome. But change dramatically, you know, I don't know. There are ways that you can kind of test and track it. And it is one of those things that does need to be kind of tested and kind of monitored in order to know. Just see how you feel eating food. You by no means do not retest yourself. The other thing that it's just showing is that over time, diversity changes as I'll explain diversity next time, but the different organisms we have in our body is the single most predictive factor in overall gut health. And that's why eating many different types of foods, not eating the same foods every day, is also the most predictive lifestyle things, dietary things you can do. So eating beans, lentils, grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, things long term. So this is kind of like, you know, 1 year after bariatric surgery, you should have a variety of these. Cultural is okay. I think it's just one particular strain of probiotic. So remember that multi-strain study? So the double-blinded placebo-controlled trial where people took a multi-strain probiotic, all those improvements in decision-making and emotional reasoning, which affects stress. That would be a probiotic similar to kefir. So kefir, just as an example, has 12, 14 different strains of bacteria in it. Culture has one, kombucha has one. So yeah, so I encourage you a variety of probiotic sources.
Mm.
Can do if they're adrenal insufficiency. If you talk to Dr. Some of you guys have met Dr. Brown, our endocrinologist, she'll tell you it doesn't exist. She'll tell you it's not a process. So I think if you want to, we can get you a visit to Dr. Brown. I'd love to hear what she has to say about that. In general, adrenal insufficiency, again, is on the spectrum of how our bodies react and respond to stress. So I think acknowledging how you swing way up and you're super stressed and you're down, are you on the immobilization, fainting, you remember, kind of syndrome, and you have a hard time getting up to just activated enough to go on with daily tasks? Because sometimes this diagnosis of adrenal insufficiency, lack the adrenaline to get up and go. So I don't know. I think it would take a lot of different approaches. You know, I would definitely consider some counseling, some psychology work, because all of that is huge. And then make sure that you're drinking as healthy as you can to support your body. Almost everything is what we call a conditional response. So if your body can get sick, it can get well, and I really do believe that. Our time frame is kind of unknown and unique to you. You talk a lot about kefir, miso, etc., but is probiotic supplements acceptable? Definitely, yeah, definitely beneficial. Probiotic foods are superior, in my opinion. So the answer is that food, definitely, supplement. Okay, there we go. I think we're kind of beating that like a dead horse. Sorry, that's a bad analogy. I'm from Idaho. I'm a rancher. So we say a lot of weird horse words. Because of tryptophan, is it not recommended to eat ground turkey for breakfast? No, you'll be fine. I think that whole like sleep analogy is kind of silly. Where tryptophan is one of the precursor pathways to serotonin. So I think serotonin is really important. And as long as you're having enough serotonin, then theoretically we should be able to transition to sleep more readily. But you shouldn't eat turkey and then, like, it's not like a Benadryl. You're not going to fall asleep instantly. Question though. Can you take too much probiotics? Oh, cute. Good. Okay, Bonnie's been answering these two. This is good because you get both of our opinions or explanations. Can you have too much probiotics? I actually don't know if you can. Another probiotic thing I should mention is that probiotics you don't just eat Greek yogurt once and then lactobacillus species are now living inside you. So I think of fermented food being like fertilizer, you know, so like compost. I like compost better because it implies that it's organic, broken down material. But so, and I think that is like a garden, you know, or like I said, like your wild field kind of ecosystem. So by adding compost to your gut garden, you're supporting it with nutrients. And it really does act like fertilizer. So you do need to have kind of frequent daily kind of consumption of these types of foods. And what they do, and again, I'll explain this next month, but what they do is they actually communicate to the bacteria that do live in you. And they tell them that that it's okay. Basically, it's like the calming effect. So they tell the organisms that live in your body that that the food you're eating is safe and that you are not you're not consuming bad bacteria or like food poisoning. And so it actually has this calming effect, anti-inflammatory effect, kind of kumbaya effect with whatever it is that you're digesting and eating. Yeah. I like to give my bacteria faces and names and emotional qualities to help me understand them. I think it does help. Okay, will you please share the webpage again? All right, good. Bonnie did that. Perfect. That's right. Yep. And we got Art of Bariatrics up. Okay, cool. I think we answered all your questions. Thank you guys so much. Again, I think this information is really important, and I'm trying to get better at explaining it to the masses. Oh, good. Here we go. After, can I ask about pancreatic enzymes? You mentioned it. I asked because my kid has type 1 diabetes. Okay. Okay, guys. I'm gonna just yeah, you can ask your pancreatic question. Do you want to unmute yourself?